It's really a pleasure to introduce our next speaker. I have a 10-year-old son. My 10-year-old son watched a YouTube video on information theory that he found by Googling Claude Shannon. And that video and many videos like it are going to be found and watched by aspiring scientists, engineers, mathematicians all over the world. I can't think of a better way of describing the profound impact that our next speaker has had on all of our lives by giving us the platform that we now use to actually find knowledge. We all, seek to change the world in our own small little way, but only a few actually achieve that on global scale. And an even smaller group, including Claude Shannon and Eric, achieve that in a way that creates a platform that lets others change the world as well. It's really amazing. So Eric Schmidt is the executive chairman of Alphabet Incorporated, and as such, he's responsible for advising the leadership and CEOs of the businesses, including Google, on business-related matters and policy. He himself is a businessman. He's a computer scientist. He's a philanthropist. He's a computer scientist, as I said. And perhaps most importantly for this audience, he is actually a Bell Labs alumnus. So we can only hope that the world's next Claude Shannon will meet the world's next Eric Schmidt at a Bell Labs summer intern orientation sometime in the future. Or maybe if we're really lucky, that's already happened. So please help me welcome Eric Schmidt back to Bell Labs, back to our stage to talk about artificial intelligence.
It's a great honor to be here with all of you, and in particular, Erwin, Len, Bob, and all of the other people I admire so much. I'm a helicopter pilot, and one of the things that I do is I fly around New Jersey a lot, and when I head south, I see this place, and I get excited because I understand how extraordinary it was for me and what an extraordinary place it is, both from the air and on the ground. It's exciting to be here. But what's interesting is when I'm on the helicopter and I'm looking around, the thing that is interesting to me most about Bell Labs is not Bell Labs, but the fact that Bell Labs is a gem with millions of houses around it. And that helps me understand how extraordinarily rare and how extraordinarily special innovation and the kind of people that are attracted to work here, now, and in the past. And that is what I want to talk today about the role of people and AI and innovation. When I was here as a summer student, right? So thank you very much. It's part of the 1127 group where we did Unix and C, where we pioneered open sourcing. And pretty much everything that you use when you're on the internet today started here, because the ideas around the operating systems, languages, all of the services were literally built on the 6th floor around the corner. And I remember it extremely well. When I was here, I didn't know anything. I was very young. I didn't know about the internet, right? I didn't know about the personal computer, the smartphone, the GPS, none of which had been invented. I didn't know about Uber and Google and Facebook. My camera used film, and my phone was the old kind, right? That was the world. But what I did know was that incredibly smart teams could assemble to make things that would change everything. And I want to talk about the role of teams and how important that is, because that's sort of what we're trying to do here in the new Bell Labs. And I also didn't know how to predict the future. Bob talked wonderfully about sort of doing these diagrams of the future and platforms and so forth. I didn't even understand that. But what I did know is that to predict the future, you have to think about strategy, and you have to be disagreeable. Now, what do you mean by disagreeable? You have to disagree. You have to challenge assumptions. Innovation is about taking a position that's contrary to the common orthodoxy. And think about conventional wisdoms, right? There's no way to edit genes directly. That's no longer true. There's no way to get human scale intuition on computers. That's also no longer true. Wow, pretty interesting. Those insights, which are in fact true, will now create 50 years of new businesses, entrepreneurs, PhDs, platforms, and great wealth. So the strategy, right, is to take our many strengths and intuitions, all the things that we talk about, and build these new platforms and services that Bob and Erwin talked about a little bit, and make people healthier and happier and smarter. That's our strategy, right? It's to maximize science and technology for the benefit of all. Now, what are our tactics? Well, in fact, we now know the list. We were confused, I think, when I was here 40 years ago. It's basically curiosity-driven research. Right? You all understand this very well. This is what you do. Scientists largely left alone to pursue hunches, brutal academic competition, Bob is right in that area, for the smartest, and encouragement of entrepreneurship with light or no regulation. And if you don't get that formula right, you don't get anything, and you're wasting hundreds of millions of dollars. It's the combination of everything that I just said that makes it happen. And the best teams bend the arc of inquiry, right, into discovery. And that's what we all try to do. So how is this permissionless innovation worked? Well, CRISPR, along with the pluripotent stem cells, have led to a revolution in genetic engineering, the Human Genome Program, anything involving the internet, which we all understand, Wi-Fi, Unix, of course, escaping the grasp of the parent of AT&T, which Bell Labs assisted in very much. And I can talk about that if you're interested in. Where does this fail? The key element is freedom, right? And almost everything that's highly regulated by the government doesn't follow this property. Education, the government itself, socialism, right? So these are the truths. And there are many reasons why people can say no, but you've got to come up with this model that I'm describing. So in our history, the Stanford Digital Libraries Project was started in the late 90s, and that was a source of funding for Larry and Sergey to found Google. ARPA funded a self-driving car project, which culminated in a desert race in 2004, which no car completed. Now, that's 12 years ago. Right? So it gives you a sense of how long these things take. The transistor in Bell Labs, everybody here knows the story of these people were fiddling around with diodes, and they figured out a way to control electrons, right? And one of the great sort of surprises was when they put the thing in water and it behaved differently. And that was an insight, an intuition to understand. What would have happened if the transistor had not been invented, right? Everything we're talking about would have happened very differently or not at all. So these sort of systemic platforms that I'm talking about, fundamental discoveries and platforms that people can build on, create the modern leverage. And this is where the sort of standing on the shoulders of other people makes sense, standing on the shoulders of giants and all those metaphors. So Uber can be understood as smartphones plus apps plus GPS, right? Now, 5 years ago, or 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I used to say the answer is smartphones plus maps plus GPS, but I didn't found Uber, right? And you didn't either. So, but nevertheless, it was completely foreseeable, right? And $80 billion later, right, you have phones. This happens over and over again. Now, you can keep going. Look at education. There's a startup by ex-Google employees called AltSchool, which is using machine learning to understand how students learn and produces an individual lesson plan by student using real teachers in real classrooms. And they follow this, and they're seeing extraordinary gains in learning. It's the combination of traditional learning, right, the kind that we all went through, but personalized learning where it's tailored to the student and it's fun. So we're finally, even in education, which has been the most change-resistant of all of the institutions that really matter, we're finally beginning to see breakthroughs because of those things that I'm talking about. Look at environmentalism. You can have iPhone apps and Android apps that take pictures, and these pictures allow you to classify biodiversity. Underwater, there are projects that use cameras underwater to classify the biodiversity and predict the kind of life forms which are being discovered all day underwater before they become extinguished. But to me, the biggest platforms will be the ones that will be driven by artificial intelligence, which is what I want to spend a little bit of time talking about. So let me say right now, I can tell you what the next platform will be past Uber. I just wish I could tell you what it did. But let me tell you what it looks like. It solves a problem we all have now. It uses cloud computing and machine learning, which I'll talk about. It uses crowdsourcing to learn something and ultimately sells that product in an interesting way, right? And that's possible now with these new algorithms. And it rapidly iterates, and it works for everybody. Now, there are plenty of examples of this kind of technology in use already. I'll give you a simple example of when you use Google, you use our various translations. Well, those are not done with dictionaries. They're done with a mechanism where they have a neural network which reads the language, if you will. It creates a thought vector, and out of the thought vector, it translates into a different language. Okay? So, pretty interesting. So how do you do speech-to-speech translation? Well, you do speech to translate to text, text to thought, thought to text, text to speech. Generalized to 1,000 by 1,000, now today 100 by 100 languages. So you can literally, on the phone, talk in one language, and it comes out in the other. Pretty neat, pretty neat. But that thought vector is very interesting, because that's the beginning of understanding of what people are saying. We offer a product called Smart Reply now, which allows you to have the computer reply to your email. This is the #1 most anticipated product out of Google, I might add. And Smart Reply reads your email and responds. In the testing, right, and we always test in beta, the most common reply to your email was, "I love you." Okay. We suppressed that answer. When you use Google Photos sort of classifies everything. It will tell you what's inside of a picture. How does it do it? Right? Use Google Photos if you're not trying it. Well, it's been trained against images. And so if you have a picture of a giraffe, it knows what giraffes look like. Also, but try, if you go to Google Photos, type the word hugs, and it will show you how pictures of people hugging each other. It's extraordinary. How does it work? Because it was trained. There's a disease called diabetic retinopathy, which is a terrible disease. Diabetes is a worldwide scourge. The blood vessels in the back of your eye go kablooey. They can be seen. Ophthalmologists diagnose this 90% accurate, at the best 90% accuracy. We have a product that diagnoses it with 99% accuracy. How did we do that? We see more eyes. We trained better. We saw 1 million eyes where the average ophthalmologist trains against 10,000 eyes. Very interesting, right? Does that matter? You betcha, if you care about your sight. So the most interesting achievement in the last little bit was a product. Those of you who don't know, there's a game called Go, which is often thought to be incomputable. It's far, far harder than chess. It's played in Asia largely. It's not a little bit in the US. And it's very popular in Korea and China. And a team at Google, in a subsidiary called DeepMind, invented a new form of reinforcement learning that allows you to cull scenarios. So what happens is it looks down a tree structure and it looks for scenarios and it does what is called planning. And the algorithm is based on the way we think our brains work. When you came into this room, your brain did not have to do a detailed analysis of the steps, the lights, the room, the acoustic, and so forth. You said, I'm in an auditorium, I already know where I am. Right? That kind of recognition can be mimicked in this reinforcement learning model. So what happens with the Go program that we designed was we come up with the scenarios, but we cull them very quickly. We had no idea whether we would win. And of course, we have a press conference and so forth. We have the human against the computer. The computer is named AlphaGo, and the human is named Lee Sedol, who's a perfectly nice guy, and he's a truly brilliant man. So we play the first game. And people have never seen a human play the way we did because we were culling the tree differently. We trained against the games, but we did the forward math to figure out positions, and we won 4 out of 5 games, making history. Now, why does this matter? So, of course, it's only a game that 200 million people watched, which is a separate discussion. It's their Super Bowl, because this is the beginning of intuition. And what intuition is there are too many choices in front of me. I feel that this is the right choice, or I sense that this is the right choice. Now, where do you use intuition? That's what science is, right? Science is about, I have an idea, I want to try this. I have an idea, I want to try that. How do I know? I just know. I've spent years thinking about this. I just know, right? And there's evidence that we can now apply this to many, many problems bedeviling science. So let's go through some of the scenarios, and then I'll finish up with some sort of questions for all of us to ponder. It's clear to me that you can take medical history now and offer suggestions as to what's going to happen. We have a project that looks at a disease called acute kidney disease, which is a terrible disease that people get in various other diseases, and they die fairly quickly. It appears that we can accurately predict the rate of demise, right, on a per-patient basis based on their history. simply because of the amount of data and the amount of pattern matching that we can do. Does this matter to you? You betcha, especially if you're in the hospital. Does it matter to doctors? Absolutely, because it allows them to decide the rate and care. That's simply an example of what's possible in the medical area. Clearly, early detection, prevention, and so forth are all part of that. I'll give you a product idea if you want to go out and create a startup right now. Build a dermatology product. Now, none of you are dermatologists, I assume, so here's how you build a dermatology product that you sell to dermatologists. Build an iPhone app, an Android app, excuse me. Take pictures. I always be careful. Take pictures of people's skin and pay doctors to classify them. Okay? So learn the good ones and the bad ones. Put it into a big database, crunch it for a bit, and then you'll be better than the dermatologists, and then sell them it as a service. Perfect. It's global, machine learning. It's a problem everybody has. How much money can you make? I don't know. People are looking at this now. The important point is it's right there in front of you. So the machine analysis of business data, the machine analysis of these sort of complex systems. One of the problems we have in life is that most of the problems that we face are complex emergent systems. Right? That you think somehow they're static, but human behavior is not static. The network analysis of the systems that you're dealing with are not static. The human problems are not static. So these complex emergent systems are very well modeled in these kinds of large data solutions. But our ultimate goal is actually AI-assisted science. I'll give you an example of things which I think it will work for. Disease diagnosis, climate modeling, drug discovery, macroeconomics, particle physics, material sciences, theorem proving, protein folding. All of these are problems that have a high degree of intuition. Up and down the New Jersey corridor, there are all of these buildings full of chemists. And what they do is they basically spend all day saying, if I add A, B, and X into a compound, I may or may not cure cancer or blow the building up. Right? They have an intuition. So they try that, and it does neither. And so they put that on the shelf, they patent it, and they wait 20 years, and maybe it'll be useful. So then they do it, and that's the morning. In the afternoon, they do it another. And these companies have thousands of people doing this. So a little bit of knowledge work will allow us to automate much of that. Now, this doesn't replace the chemists. It just gives them better judgment. So the key point here is that we're not automating jobs, we're automating tasks, right, in this whole problem. So whether it's farming and figuring out which herbicides and knowing what we know about organic chemistry works, whether it's liberating people from dangerous and interesting jobs. I haven't even talked about self-driving cars, right? 31,000 people die in car accidents in America every year. That's a terrible tragedy, right? The cars drive themselves now. The reason that you're not in them is because of the value added of regulation. Right, it's been very, very difficult. And by the way, we can't test them in California. We're testing them in Texas, right, for that reason. So what I really want is I want a system which I call not Eric. There's Eric and not Eric. And Eric is me, and not Eric is this assistant which is personal and I control, which just makes me smarter. And I defy you to argue against the argument that making people smarter is a good idea, right? And this technology should get to the point where each and every one of us as humans, globally, can have this thing that will help us, at a minimum, reply to our email, right? But perhaps do much, much more and deal with all of the kinds. Let me finish with a couple of points and take your questions. I think a lot of people have raised questions about all of this, and I want to say right up front that I have sort of 3 rules about AI. The first is that AI should benefit the many, not the few, right? This should not be an elite technology. It should not only be available to rich countries, rich individuals. It should be available to everybody. And I think that's pretty obvious. The second is that the research in this area, which is heating up, this is the hottest area in computer science right now, should be done in the open. Now, I'm not saying open source. I'm saying open as opposed to in military labs. I'm very concerned that some government will say they'll classify this stuff, they'll put it in some super secret lab, not because it won't be useful for military purposes, which is a separate discussion, but because we all benefit from the development of these algorithms and the impact that they're going to have. And then the third is that the systems that people are building need to be under positive control, in the sense that we need to know what they're doing, we need to sort of understand them, we need to articulate them for obvious control reasons. Let me finish with some of the questions that I think I'd like at some way to say that, I sort of laid out, here's a model for innovation, here's a way to make things happen, here's this sort of notion of permissionless innovation. What are some of the problems that I'd like to see done? Jerry Brown said in a speech last summer, we should be unreasonable but in an intelligent way. Going back to my disagreeable point. We should be unreasonable but in an intelligent way. What are the new industries that can be made possible by large-scale use of virtual reality? With synthetic biology combined with the maker movement, can we accelerate the construction of new things that will help us all out? Is there a way to accelerate the drug discovery cycle, which takes 20 years? People are dying while all this stuff is going on. Modern medicine is amazing and incredibly expensive. Is there some way to build a volume solution to make it much faster? What do we do about rising inequality in life? We hear this every day in the political sphere in America. What do we do about it, right? There are profound implications for the things that I'm talking about. How can we use the technology to decrease inequality, not increase it? Can we figure out some new interface for time, right? Some way to manage my time better so I use it optimally, something other than a clock? Can we make some good things more profitable? Wellness over illness, renewable energy over fossil fuels, rehabilitation over prison, hope over fear, and peace over war. Are there mechanisms or technologies that we can use to do that? Can we accelerate the kind of creativity that I'm describing? John Maynard Keynes in 1930 proposed his grandchildren would live in a leisure society where they work just 3 hours a day. There's no one in this room that can say that that's true of any of their family members. With automation, is this going to be true? What does this mean for our societies? And how do we take advantage of the emergent science of cities? Because cities are where the innovation is. How do we make them safer, more fun, more dynamic? Because that's where people are going to live. I'm here because I'm profoundly grateful for what Bell Labs did for me, and I'm also to represent not only the industry for the world, but the technologies that were invented here are what you use every day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. It was a wonderful talk, and I have to say it's probably the first talk that I've ever heard the idea that could make someone $1 billion if the audience runs out and implements it immediately. It's
Now, I suggest you skip the coffee break.
Yes. Early bird gets the worm, as they say in this space. So we have time for a couple of questions. Anyone? Do we have Ronaldo?
Another one of my heroes.
Eric, a great talk, and it's nice
Al,
to see you
sorry.
back at Bell Labs.
Yes, this is yes, one of my many faculty members, Al.
One interesting aspect of the development of AI is that we built a machine, or IBM built a machine that could play computer chess. You guys built a AI machine that could play Go. How do we make AI more plastic so that we can get one platform that will do many tasks with the same kind of facility that these machines do today?
So the state of the art, and thank you very much, Al, who hired me in 1976, I might add. So thank you. One of the limits of the current models is that the neural nets have to be programmed by very smart people. And the games that we're describing, the gamers, if you will, they don't write the algorithm, they construct the training model to train the neural network, right? The neural networks are infinitely powerful compared to what we've ever done. So that's the great breakthrough. But they still have to understand the problem domain. And when the industry gets itself hyped up, it forgets to explain that, right? That's the current limiter. There's quite a bit of research in people doing systems where the rules change, right? So in games, the rules are static. But the feeling is that the next breakthrough will be the ability for the networks themselves to modify based on the changing of the rules that occurs dynamically. That will allow us to apply this technology to a broad range of time-based scenarios. So the mathematical research is around the concept of time in neural networks and planning in the presence of time. But the impact for us is that we'll be able to look at time series data and say that was then, but now is different. An obvious one would be financial markets, where the rules are always changing, or political rules, or those sorts of things. So that's the next breakthrough.
Thanks. One more question in the back? Okay.
Hi. So one common criticism of AI systems of the neural variety are that they're difficult to interpret. So as AI moves into such important areas as healthcare and say, early stage education, what would your comments be on where we're going, both for experts to interpret these models and for a broader user base?
So for the background of the rest of the audience, these networks are trained, but when you ask them how they learned something, they can't answer that question, right? So my favorite is that I'm driving a self-driving car, and we get to the stop sign, and the car, does a rolling stop. The policeman, comes over and gives you a ticket and asks the car, why did you do the rolling stop? Because you didn't do it, and the car can't answer, right? So these are sort of difficult moral problems with the policeman and you. The car doesn't know, I wasn't driving, I'm sorry, give me the ticket, let me go, right? There, again, is significant research in trying to tag and otherwise take the networks and be able to sort of source out how they learned something. But your question points that these are not perfect models. They don't perfectly solve the solution. They are approximate. They do make mistakes, which is why human control at the moment is very important, and why human judgment, the human is the operator and the computer is giving them greater reach of their imagination as opposed to having the computer be in charge, which will be a long time from now for that reason.
The answer may be that you trained the car in New Jersey, but that's a separate thing on driving rules and everything else. Maybe we have one more question? Okay. Hussein?
Why don't we do the second one as well? We'll do two real quick.
Okay.
I think relevant question to both questions. When we achieve general AI, will that help explain how human brain works? Or will that happen after we know how human brain works?
The first question is, when will we achieve general AI? And we don't know. The optimists think it's within a decade. I'm not as optimistic. And the question was, how would you know you had general AI? And the answer is that the computer would come up with some result that was surprising to humans. It would actually come up with a new proof or something, more likely. It's unlikely that computers for a very long time will look at all like biological brains. Right? The paths are so divergent, the algorithms, the way they work, the digital world versus the analog world that we are. So I think it would be very much speculative beyond that. To me, they're different aspects of life, human life, and then these artificial brains, and they do different things, and they're useful for different things. They have perfect memories. Our memories are not good. That kind of thing.
Thank you.
And then just a real quick final question. Yes, sir.
Certainly driven a bit by the most recent Microsoft bad entrance in the AI. There's some very bright people who are worried about the singularity. How do you counter their fears?
Well, everybody here has gone to too many movies. Okay? So, and I think the criticisms are based on not a misreading of where we are in the science, right? So it is possible that all this sort of horrific things can happen and accelerated humanity and all that kind of stuff. But it's a very long time from now. Where we are right now is we have the ability to accelerate the kind of combinatoric thinking that humans do under human control. That's not the same thing as volition and the robot, deciding to destroy humanity and that kind of stuff. That's properly the area of movies. It's possible these things will occur, but highly unlikely in our lifetimes. What is much more likely is these incredibly intelligent assistants that are very, very deeply useful in the conduct of human, experience. So I didn't talk about it, but what do I really want my digital persona to do? I really want it to make me cool in front of my daughters. I want it to sort of tell me what to say, and have me be really, that's a really useful function, right? When that problem's solved, we'll declare success. Thank you.
Let's thank Eric again. Marcus, would you like
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. You have to go and stand over here. And you have to hold the
my
the
goodness.
award. Yeah, it's quite weighty.
It's quite an honor, I must say.
Well, thank you, Eric. You were number 3 today, but I think you may have won in the most interesting talk. No harm or no denigration of the others. Fantastic talk. Well, of course, I say that because it agrees with our thinking.
Always good.
We actually.